No, here we go. Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the October 21st regular meeting of council, being held virtually, as you noticed, due to an incident at the City Hall in a forum. So we will do our best to have a virtual meeting here and stay with us and be patient because when I have three electronic devices all in front of me at one time, I start to tremble just a little bit. So here we go now. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. We have the consent agenda up first, folks. The minutes of the council meeting held October 7th, 2024, and also the approval of the council meeting agenda. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations? Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any errors or omissions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It takes me a while to see where you guys, you keep on moving spaces here. It's Hollywood Squares. All those that carries. Thank you very much. We have three delegations today. We're going to, our first delegation today is by TELUS regarding an update on fiber network availability in Parksville. A presentation by Darren Wong of TELUS regarding the new fiber network being installed in Parksville. So Darren, welcome. It's been a while to get you all here, and I'm glad you're joining us today. Talk to us all about your new fiber network here, Darren. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Mr. Mayor and Council. It's our pleasure as TELUS to be presenting to you information about fiber optic network deployment as well as the availability of TELUS Pure Fiber services. Before, I'd also like to introduce my colleague here, General Manager Shay Draper, who will walk through the first initial set of slides. I'm just wondering, will those slides be popping up on the screen here, or will we just be talking through them as we go?
They should be popping up if last virtual delegations would pop up in interrupt our Zoom meeting here. So start the slides, Darren, and I'll text my staff here to see if there's anything not happening.
Okay, just give me a moment here.
Just got a message from staff. They're opening right now. Your screen is now shared, Darren. You're good to go.
Okay. As Darren mentioned, my name's Shay Draper. I'm General Manager with TELUS, supporting Vancouver Island, the Sunshine Coast. If we go into the next slide, I just wanted to ground Mayor and Council on really just TELUS's investment in BC and specifically on the island. And this will kind of lay the groundwork for Darren to talk a little bit about what's unique about what we're doing in Parksville. And then I'll close it out with just talking about specifically the Pure Fiber services that will be available. So I think many of you are familiar. Obviously, TELUS has been operating in BC for well over 100 years. But we've invested 63 billion in BC since 2000. We're really passionate about making sure that BC is one of, if not the number one most connected province in Canada. And over the last 10 years, most of that investment's really gone into making sure that we bring optic fiber cable or fiber optic cable to communities, big and small. So a lot of that actually is in partnership with provincial and federal government. And we're knowing our vast province and some of the unique remote and rural locations, that partnership's important as we talk about trying to bring connectivity into the province. We have over 10,000 employees or team members that work and operate within British Columbia, and this is our home province when it comes to our headquarters. When you think about the investment, think about it as maybe three key components that are important to note. So number one is we've connected almost 2 million homes now to Pure Fiber, and that's really the only 100% fiber optic network right to the side of the house. And that investment is not just important for businesses and residents, but also all of that fiber optic cable helps us power the improvements that we're going to see also on the wireless side. So I won't go into a lot of detail on 5G, but just think about 5G as bringing faster speeds, allowing you to be able to have more devices connected so congestion can be addressed. And then the third piece is really about low latency, which is going to be important whenever you start to see self-driving cars, but also probably in the short term for different industries in terms of being able to see benefit from an improved wireless network. Now, as you go through there, about 50 or 100 years ago, depending on your community, we sat there and had copper. That would have been our generational investment. We're decommissioning that as we start to talk about recycling it, allowing it to go back into the circular economy. And then obviously there's about an 80% power decrease in pure fiber network versus copper. So there's power savings as we start to shut down our copper network as well.
So thanks so much, Shay. So I'll spend the next couple of minutes here talking about the partnership between TELUS and an entity known as F3 Networks. So I just do want to send their regrets on behalf of F3 Networks. They were able to put some slides together, but they weren't able to join us on the call today. So folks in the community may have already started to see letters from F3 Networks, and so I wanted to spend a couple of minutes just to talk about, who they are and what the relationship is to TELUS. So as you can see on this slide, F3 Networks describes themselves as a dark fiber company. So you might be asking, what is dark fiber? What we mean by dark fiber is that it's simply fiber optic cable that doesn't have light or a signal passing through it. So essentially what this means is that F3 Networks builds fiber networks. So they build fiber optic cable that you see that is strung between telephone poles as well as underground. And in terms of the relationship between TELUS and F3 Networks, TELUS will be providing the light or the signal. So F3's networks cables will still be connected to TELUS's central offices, and then TELUS is going to be providing the light or the signal to bring pure fiber services to individual homes and businesses. F3 Networks is also it's also partly owned by AFL Telecommunications, and AFL Telecommunications has worked with TELUS for many years, well over a decade now, building fiber optic networks across Vancouver Island as well as many other communities across Western Canada. So in other words, F3 Networks and AFL, they're a trusted brand, they're a trusted partner of TELUS, and they know how to build fiber optic networks to TELUS's high standards, as well as they know how to work with communities, whether it's on Vancouver Island or across Western Canada. A couple more points here. Finally, F3 Networks is a fully registered telecommunications carrier with the CRTC. And then with respect to just the end piece here on the relationship between F3 Networks and TELUS, F3 Networks and TELUS have a commercial agreement. So TELUS has an agreement with F3 Networks to use their fiber optic cables to distribute and provide TELUS pure fiber services to customers across the municipality. This slide here deals with the build summary, or essentially what the scope of the construction of the fiber optic network will be over the coming months. So in terms of the actual coverage, I mean, we see a few numbers here, 11,500 premises. So basically individual homes, whether that's single family detached, as well as multi-dwelling or what we call multi-family units, as well as businesses. And when we look at the scope of their coverage, basically it's going to achieve full coverage for the community of Parksville. And the scope of F3 Networks build is consistent with how TELUS has built fiber optic communities across Vancouver Island and Western Canada, where we have achieved above 90% fiber optic network coverage in those communities. And then in terms of placing the fiber optic cables on existing telephone poles or conduit where applicable, there will be a bit of civil construction associated with the build as well. So we've called out here, there's these metal cabinets called fiber distribution hubs. They're approximately 1 meter by 2 meters. And basically if there are a few of these in the community already for existing areas that have fiber optic network coverage, but there will be a few more of these cabinets, and AFL is working with the city on getting those approved. And these devices are passive devices. They don't make noise. They're not powered. And their sole purpose is to distribute fiber to individual buildings and premises. So in terms of the project timelines, what can the community expect over the coming weeks and coming months? Well, AFL and F3 Networks have been hard at work on both planning and designing, as well as the civil engineering associated with this project. And they will actually be starting construction in the community later this week. And as I mentioned at the outset, representatives of F3 Networks have already been active with folks in the community. What they've been doing is they've been engaging individual homeowners as well as business owners, seeking their permission for what we call a fiber drop, or essentially a fiber connection to their individual home or business. So these fiber drop permissions, they are provided free at charge. It doesn't cost anything for homeowners or business owners to receive a fiber drop. And basically, once they've received that drop, then they have the option in the future, should they choose, to sign up for TELUS Pure Fiber services. In terms of how the construction is going to proceed, construction is typically done one neighborhood at a time. So we in the business, we call neighborhoods fiber serving areas. And so basically, once construction for the fiber optic network is done in one neighborhood or FSA, once it's tested, we basically turn off that neighborhood for service, right? So how it works is basically we will not wait. F3 Networks and TELUS will not wait until the network is entirely constructed in the city of Parksville. Once the neighborhood is ready, once it's tested, it will be turned on and people will have an opportunity to sign up for TELUS Pure Fiber services. And then in terms of the construction, as I said, it's going to start beginning this week, and construction will continue right into Q1 of next year, completing by the end of March 2025. And I'll turn it back to my colleague Shay.
I'll be relatively brief here. At the end of the day, we wanted to make sure everyone understood kind of that unique relationship we have with F3 Networks. At the end of the day, for a customer, they're going to have access to all of the TELUS Pure Fiber services. And why Pure Fiber, if I was to give you the short 30-second clip of why Pure Fiber is so much better, especially versus what we would have had in a copper environment. Really think about it as unlimited bandwidth and asymmetrical speed. So we can move information back and forth to the cloud. And that's not just important for people that might be gaming at home. It's really important for businesses. And if you think about healthcare and how many times you're sitting there and potentially having a video call with your doctor or needing to monitor a patient, those things all require a lot of bandwidth both directions. So for us, this is a really, really important way to future-proof this community. If I go to the next slide, just wanted to call out the fact that we have For Good programs, and so we don't want anyone left behind. And so these programs really allow people access to both internet and mobility at a reduced rate. And when you think about what this program originally targeted, it would have been people that were, potentially aging out of foster care, et cetera. But now it's really been also focused in on that senior demographic that in many cases needs to continue to stay connected and may not have the means to do so. And so there is great programs out there to support those. And then my final comment I'd make is we are very passionate about giving back into the communities where we live, work, and operate. We have a number of technicians that live in Parksville. And so I just like to call out the fact that as we go through, you will likely see people in purple and white shirts going out there and doing things like beach cleanups and other things, because that's just a part of our DNA and our culture. So I'll stop there and maybe just look to see if there's any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shay and Darren, for your presentation. I know that this has been much anticipated by our Parksville community, but there's a lot of people very excited about this. So thank you for attempting to get us up and running on this, being introduced to the dark fiber. I just love the sound of that. So I'm very impressed. Council, I'm going to watch for your hands. Turn on your video if they're not already on. If you have any questions that you would like to pose to our delegation right now. I don't see any hand. Oh, there you go, Mary. Okay, Councillor Beale, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I had the pleasure of speaking with one of the TELUS representatives when I was at the UBCM. Hang on. The video is, when I go to speak, then the video stops. I don't know why, but hopefully you can hear me. And in the conversation, I understand that TELUS is actually in the house building or, building housing due to some freed up some land because of this switch. And I'm just wondering if there's going to be land that becomes available for housing in the Parksville area.
It's a great question. So maybe I'll start, and Darren, you can top up. I mentioned that our copper networks, we are going to be decommissioning them, taking the copper off the poles. The other thing that happens with that is there's equipment in our central offices that we're required to run those copper networks. And as you start to remove the copper, you can actually shrink the footprint that we require for our central office. And so the short answer is we're looking at every opportunity to be able to free up land. And you may hear the term TELUS Living, which is really where we're trying to bring in housing solutions, because many of our central offices are in residential areas, and in areas where there's not a lot of free land. In terms of Parksville right now, we're still going through, so we'll first need to put the network in place, and then we will look at whether or not we could actually take our central office and free up some space. I would tell you, as compared to some of the other locations, there was big parcels of land. The Parksville location is not a large parcel of land, so there might be an opportunity, but I don't think it's going to be a significant one, and it probably won't be looked at until we're probably 2 or 3 years down the road from build being completed.
Okay, thank you.
Well, even if it's a smaller piece of land, we're okay with tiny homes.
Yeah. Yeah. The one that might be, if you ever drive into Nanaimo and you look
We
downtown,
appreciate that.
yeah, that's the one that you can look at as a great example, and we'll certainly take this one away as well, and engage as we get better view into what we could do in Parksville.
Yep. I'll complete by saying thank you once again for your presentation. I don't know if you individuals from TELUS came by my residence fairly recently. Very well-informed young individual, and he explained what was happening regarding the new fiber system. So yeah, he already got our permission, and yeah, we're good to go. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor and
Yeah,
Council.
thanks, Darren.
Thank you. Take
Yeah,
care.
Thank you, Darren and Shay. Okay, that's our first delegation, Council. We have our next delegation is from Geo Advice regarding the sewer master plan, presentation by Warner De Shetson.
The Shetson. Yes.
Shetson? Yeah, there we go. Shetson of Geo Advice to present an overview of the city's sewer master plan. Go ahead, Werner. Yeah, we can see you and hear you. So thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Let me share my screen here with the slides that we prepared together. Give me a second here. Here we go. Do you guys see the first slides? The first slide, Mr. Mayor, do you see the first slide?
We actually see it's just a message that's come across, and here we are. Yeah, it just appeared now. Yes, you are on our screen.
Perfect. So you see this the slide title. Perfect.
Yes, yeah. It's looks like a red and blue image, and an individual reaching for goal.
Right. Well, thank you again for inviting me. My name is Werner De Shetson. I work for Geo Advice Engineering, and I was the project manager of the city-wide sewer master plan project. So let's start with a quick outline. This is our presentation outline. It will be 5 to 10 minutes, no more than 10 minutes, I promise. We'll start with an introduction. Then we'll talk about your city sewer model that we use to help to identify your bottlenecks in your system. We'll talk about the capacity analysis. We'll talk about the list of projects that we recommend for improving the city performance. And then we'll talk about this new legislation, Bill 44, for small-scale multi-unit housing modeling. We'll talk about the impact on your sewer collection system.
Okay.
So introduction here, Geo Advice and Urban Systems, being our sub-consultant, was hired back in 2022 by the city of Parksville to update the city sewer master plan. listed here are the key tasks we performed. We built a model representing your sewer collection system. We also made sure that the model was validated against field measurements. We analyzed your system capacity and identified where are the bottlenecks, the capacity bottlenecks in your system. We developed a capital improvement plan, and then we assessed the impact of Bill 44 on your sewer collection system. What happened with Bill 44? Will it create new bottlenecks? Where are the areas that will have to be upgraded to take into account Bill 44? So we build a model. What is a model? Well, this is a tool that we use to help us to make informed decision about your system performance. It's a representation of your system, of your sewer collection system. It is used to predict the hydraulic behavior. What happened if you add 100 people here? What happened to the downstream flow path? What happened if a pipe break? What happened if the INR rate doubles? Well, using this model will help you to predict the hydraulic performance of your system. So we use this tool to help and identify your existing and future issues, your existing and future operational issues. So we had a series of tasks to develop your model. We created an existing scenario representing this is the city of Parkdale today. And then we created also a scenario representing your system in 20 years, in 2041. We also had field measurements taken at the Ocean Place, which allowed us to gain more confidence in the model results, in the model simulation results. If you look at your average dry weather flow, this is at the treatment plant. During a typical day, you have about 60 liters per second entering your treatment plant. And the 60 liters per second has different components. It has a base sewer component and also a groundwater infiltration component. So we made sure everything aligned with field measurements. The next slide here shows you here a comparison. Remember, in November 2021, there was a big storm event. Like 2 days ago was also a big storm event. You can see red represents the model results. The model blue represents field measurements. And you can see that the model is able to replicate what happened on that big storm event. This allowed us to have confidence when we used your model to predict what happened now in 2041, for example, or what happened in 5 years or 10 years, because we were able to validate and have the model aligned with reality. We could use it with confidence to predict the hydraulic behavior of your system, any place, really at any place. We'll have some figures in a second here. Part of your sewer collection system is what we call INR, inflow and infiltration. This is additional load that enters your system and that will be collected, pumped, and then treated at your treatment plant. Obviously, we want to minimize that. When you look at your rates compared to other municipalities are quite low. When you look at the rates here, between 14,000 liters per day per hectare up to 27,000 liters per day per hectare, those to me are considered low INR rates, which is very good, meaning your system is new and you don't have a lot of leaks or holes or inflow getting from rainfall runoff entering your sewer collection system. You don't want that. You want that your rainfall runoff, you want to enter your stormwater collection system, not your sewer collection system. But overall, it's not too bad. You have a low INR rate, which is good. Then the next step was to analyze your system capacity, your hydraulic capacity. So your capacity to bring all your base sewer flow to your treatment plant through your pipe network, through some pumping, and making sure that there are no bottlenecks when you look at the future, when you look at today, but also at the future system. So those are the results. Today, in terms of gravity main system, your pipe network, there are no deficiencies in terms of the hydraulic capacity. There are no surcharge pipe, no pipes being full, so that's great news. In the future, when we add the growth, because you're in the city, there's going to be some major developments in the next 20 years. There's 5 new pipes. I'll show you a location. 5 pipes that will be surcharged and will be undersized and will have to be upgraded with bigger pipes. Also in the future, in terms of your pumping station, one called Martindale will become deficient because there's an upstream development. When you add that development in the future scenario, that pump is too small, will have to be upgraded to a bigger pump. This figure here, if you look, you can see this is your pipe network system. Everything goes by gravity and to this outfall to your treatment plant. Well, actually it goes to RDN, to the regional district network. You can see on this road here on Craig Street, if I zoom here, there's some bottleneck here in the future, a red pipe, because there's some major development in the future. This pipe is going to be too small. And then same thing with Martindale lift station. There's some major development upstream. The pump station will become too small. So the next task was about developing a plan of projects to address all your capacity deficiencies, all the pipes and pumps that are too small in terms of sizes, but also looking at the condition. And as you know, your infrastructure ages and will have to be replaced because they don't last forever. So taking into account condition results and capacity results, our sub-consultant Urban Systems identified for the next 20 years about 18 kilometers of pipe replacement. 18 kilometers that should be replaced because of condition and or capacity. And I showed you already those critical bottlenecks in terms of capacities. And then what they also did, that created and ranked and timed those projects. So we have 18 kilometers of pipes to be upgraded or replaced, and we sorted them by timing. What should be done within the next 5 years, within the next 5 to 10 years, and also in the next 10 to 20 years. So a short term, a medium term, and a long term program. So we split those 18 kilometers, and also Urban System, our sub-consultant, did some costing and cost estimation for those upgrades. Here shows a map where we talked about the 2 critical projects. We know this pipe along Craig Street will have to be upgraded because we have some upstream development, and then Martindale pump station will also have to be upgraded if there's an upstream development going ahead, that we assume this pump. Currently it's sized properly, but in the future, if you're adding this major development upstream, then the pump station will be too small. So in terms of cost, Urban System also identified a gap between how much you spend every year into your replacement and into your asset management program. They recommended to increase gradually funding to meet those projects. And they recommended by year 5 that the city put aside about $2 million per year for the sewer collection system. And by year 10, about $4 million per year to make sure you have enough cash to pay for those projects. They also recommended to continue inspect your facilities through CCTV, for example. And to finish this presentation, I'm sure you've heard about the small-scale multi-unit housing legislation. What we modeled a scenario where we assume that about 20% of all your single-family houses will convert and will be converted to multi-units. So we added an extra 6,000 people to your system. It's only 20% uptake percent. And what we saw was actually not that bad in terms of how robust your system is. Martindale pump station obviously will become more deficient. Makes sense. If we're adding more people upstream, it will have to be a bigger pump. and then we only identify about 500 meters of new deficiencies. So 500 meter of new deficiencies of key location within your collection system, where if Bill 44 happens, assuming a 20% uptake, those pipe will become undersized. I don't know. And then, well, thank you so much. I hope I didn't extend the time, but this is my presentation on your sewer master plan project with Sean Barvin. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Werner, for your presentation. No, your timing was just perfect. Anyways, it's very important information that we need to know planning for the future. I'll just start with one question before I open up here. So what I heard from your presentation here, Werner, there's nothing of immediate attention that needs to happen. Like I looked at the project under short terms, 1 to 3 years. There's nothing that is going to imminent failure in the next 6 months. You didn't find anything like that. Is that correct, sir?
Correct. You're right. You're right. So in terms of, yes, in terms of capacity bottlenecks,
Yes.
You have capacity. What urban systems recommended is make sure you adjust and make sure you put enough money on the side to pay for those projects in the future.
Right. Yeah, the reserve funding is very important here. So as I went through your slides here, Project 1, Craig Street, looked like it would be the one that we're looking at. It was listed in the short-term category. So
Yes.
that's probably what we're going to be looking at, putting some reserve funds aside for that in the next financial plans.
Perfect. Yes.
Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on to council. Any questions from council? Councillor Grens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our delegation. Thank you so much, Werner, for your presentation. I wonder if you could maybe give us a bit of a sense. I assume that your outfit works with other organizations or other communities. Can you give us a bit of a sense of how we look in terms of our ability to take on, in particular, Bill 44, but other development relative to other communities of a similar size?
Well, your system is very robust. We did not identify any existing deficiencies with respect to capacity. Your INR rates, which is this additional flow that enters your sewer collection system when it rains, those rates are very low in terms of liter per day per hectare compared to other municipalities, which is great news. I think your system is in great shape. It's one of the best I've ever seen in terms of the capacity. You have a lot of reserve. There's a lot of room for development. I'll still recommend to do some, when you have large development reviews, do large developments, still do those standalone analysis, making sure that development, using that flow path, there's no bottlenecks. As I said, overall, your system is a lot of reserve, low INR rate. Your liter per day per person is reasonable at 250 liter per day per person, which is reasonable in terms of sewer load. Your pumping, except Martindale, in the future will become deficient with when this large development occurring upstream. Overall, let me know, over the weekend, did you guys have any issues over the weekend, for example? Did you have flooded area? Did you have pump station where you had multiple pumps running at the same time within the station? How did the system perform this weekend? Do you know?
That would be probably Mr. Bowman. Sean, are you there? Was there any situations in Parks Road during the atmospheric river?
That's a good question, Mr. Mayor, and is really an operational question, and I'm not in the loop with how things went this weekend. I didn't hear anything negative.
Yeah, and nor did I, and I was out and about this weekend somewhat, just kind of keep an eye on everything else, but at the same time, I didn't notice any flooding. We would expect flooding to occur on Martindale as it's an annual event. That's actually on the RDM side, but at the same time, that's due to excessive flow in the river. And not in a rainfall event. It's just the flooding from the river that's accumulated after a major rainfall event. I did not see that happen this weekend at all. Councillor Beal, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay there. One question I had, looking for actually great report, wonderful. I think overall sounds like we're in good shape, and the plan for Craig Street, that's really helpful information. One question I had is regarding the comments about the Martindale lift station. I gather that it would be deficient depending on the amount of development that takes place upstream. Is there some kind of a number attached with how large a development would need to be to cause a problem, or conversely, is it good for up to a certain amount, and do we have a number to go by?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. I'm looking at the report, and what we determine is that today there's an excess capacity of about 6 liters per second. So today, if we, I don't have a calculator, but you could easily convert 6 liters per second could be easily converted into people. If you give me 2 minutes, I can do a quick calculation here. It's going to be, if I do the math here, so 6 liters per second times 86,400, which is the number of seconds in one day, divided by, let's say, your 250 liters per day. It's about, no, this is peak. I would say about 1,000 people. Very rough. Now, well, this is using a peaking factor of 2 and no INR. Let's say if I be conservative here, 500 people. Again, we could easily count, if you want to have a better number, we could calculate that for you. But today there's a reserve. The pump is sized for 50 liters per second, 50. Your peak flow today, it's 43 liters per second, 44 liters per second. So that's how much upstream there's about, when it's raining hard, everybody's having a shower, flushing the toilet at the same time. There's 44 liters per second entering the lift station wet well, and the size of the pump is 50. So there's 6 liters per second available reserve, peak flow. If you convert it, it's about 500 people. Okay, if you want to have the exact number, I could provide it to Sean, but But in the future, according to our model, in 20 years, there's going to be 80 liters per second entering that station, 80. And we only have 50 available. So this 80 come in, 50 pumps out, there's going to be 30 left, and then it's going to be accumulated, and then it could create the wet well being flooded, because I can only pump 50, but 80 is coming in. And that's when you have issues. You have to have a bigger pump.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and thank you. I'll just touch on that if I could to Werner at the time. So basically you're suggesting that the pump capacity right now is at 50, and we need to just upgrade the pump. So it's not piping to the lift station, or the lift station itself capacity is okay, or it's just we have to upgrade to that higher capacity pump?
It's just a bigger pump.
Dude, that's
great. That's all. The piping is fine. It's just the pump is too small.
Oh yeah, well that's great. That's I like that infrastructure upgrade compared to taking up a whole bunch of roads and replacing pipe. That's great. Thank you, Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to our delegation for the presentation. My question is about the costs associated with the upgrades. When you gave us those figures, are those today's dollars or inflation adjusted in the future when the upgrades might need to be done?
That's a good question. Well, this was done, I think it's today's dollars, but I can double check with our subconsultant. I believe those are today's. This is 2020. This was done in 2023. This is 2023 dollars. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure.
Right. Yeah, I saw figures in millions, and when we talk about 10 years time, that might just double. So again, thank you. My next question is, when you're talking about the pump station capacity, are you also looking into the storm sewer, or is it just sanitary sewer?
Yes, this project was only sanitary sewer.
Okay.
Nothing, nothing about your drainage system or your stormwater collection system, only your sanitary sewer.
Okay. In your report, would there be any recommendations for any future pump stations? As you know, we are looking at updating our OCP, so that could help us kind of direct where and how the growth should happen in the city. So would there be any recommendations for any future pumping stations that could be recommended that needs to be set up to make sure our systems are still robust and are able to handle the capacity as we grow?
Well, we know that that was not part of our scope. You're talking about future catchments, future layouts, where you could have this area is vacant and this mountain will have to be developed. Now we looked at your existing serviced area, your existing network, and we made sure that is strong enough. And if we had major development upstream at the extremities, we identified the closest manhole, existing manhole, and then we conveyed everything downstream, but we did not consider future network, future pump station, future catchments.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Any other questions or comments, council? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Werner. You also get to be our next delegation as well. So we have Werner now presenting. Our GeoAdvice will present the water master plan for the city's water master plan overview. Thanks, Werner. Go ahead, carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could you confirm you see my title slide?
Confirm, sir. Water utility system master plan is on the screen.
Well, again, I'm still excited to be here with you on this day. Hopefully everybody's dry and safe. So my name is Werner de Schaatsen. I was the project manager for this water master plan update. I work for GeoAdvice Engineering. We are civil engineers, civil consultants, and we teamed up with Urban Systems for the capital improvement plan and the financial analysis. The agenda is very similar to our sewer presentation. I'll start with an introduction. I'll talk about your city model that we used extensively to identify your bottleneck in your water distribution system. We'll talk about the analysis. We'll talk about the different projects and the capital improvement project plan. And then we'll finish and we'll discuss about SMOOTH. It's an acronym for small scale, multi-unit housing, or Bill 44, if you like, as a short. So Urban Systems being our sub, again, same team. So we had some efficiencies on this project. Because, for example, the future scenario, well, it's the same future scenario. When we looked at both plans, the number of people we added, about 6,000 people, is the same distribution, the same developments. So there were some efficiencies of doing the two plans together. So we build also a model representing your water distribution system. We analyze your system performance in terms of pressure. Remember, your distribution system is to bring water to your users at acceptable pressure, and also make sure that there's adequate fire flow. So your water distribution system is also responsible making sure that when there's a fire and you open a hydrant, there's enough fire flow, enough flow out of the hydrant. We looked at the impact of Bill 44 with respect to your distribution system, and then we wrote the plan with all our recommendations. So we developed a model, a new model representing your water distribution system. Very powerful tool because it has the ability to predict the hydraulic behavior. What happened if a pipe break? What happened in the summer on July 17, which was your maximum data amount? What happened? What happened if there's a fire? Again, we can use this model to predict the hydraulic behavior with respect to flow rate, pressure, velocity, head losses, and we used it to predict existing and future deficiencies. We had a series of tasks to build your model. There's a lot of data collection, a lot of back and forth and teamwork with the city, confirming we have the right sizes, the right facilities, the right connection, the right boundaries between your two pressure zones, making sure we have the right data about your wells. All your water comes from your wells. And then we calibrated and validated it. So how much do we trust your model? Well, I trust the model because I was able to use it and compare model results against field measurements. And we did both hydrant testing, where we used hydrant results and compared against model results, and also looking at your SCADA system. And you can see another figure here showing this was your maximum data amount. Must be like July 1st, 2021. Remember that heat dome. And again, blue represents the model, red represents the field, and we have a perfect alignment out of your booster pump station, where the model is able to replicate over an extended duration, 24-hour, that maximum day pretty well, bang on. The exact same, whatever we observe, the model is able to replicate within reasonable, very good agreement, like within less than 5%. Then we use this model to look at your pump station capacity, your valve capacity, your storage capacities, and then your network capacity, right? So we need to look at everything. You're getting water from your wells. Is it big enough? It's being pumped. Is the pump big enough? When it's pumping to a tank, is your tank big enough? Is your valve, your critical pressure reduction valve station, is it big enough? So we looked at everything, and then we looked at each hydrant, making sure we have enough flow out of the hydrant, that if there's a fire occurring in that area, is there enough capacity out of the pipe to stop the fire? So let's have a look at the results, and then I'll show you some maps. In terms of high pressure, you don't have any problem. You don't want to have too high pressure in your distribution system, otherwise pipe will break. So high pressure, not an issue. In terms of low pressure, you have one existing area, but it's not critical because it's not too low. The minimum pressure to maintain it's 44 psi. It's about 30 meters of pressure. In your distribution system, you want pressure to be between 30 meters and 70 meters. So we looked at that range, and in terms of low pressure, you have only one area, but it's not critical. In the future, because of the Craig Road development, there's going to be one area that will have low pressure that we'll have to address. So as a city, according to your bylaw, your distribution system must maintain pressure between 44 and 100 psi. So there's one area that will drop. So it means pipes are too small. There's too much friction losses. You need to make the pipe bigger. Or maybe there's a pump too small. Who knows? Then we looked at your hydrants. And then we looked and identified 54 deficiencies today that hydrants are, in terms of flow capacity, there's not enough flow, that the flow available at that location, at those 54 locations, is smaller than the requirement according to the building type or the land use type. So we have 54 deficiencies in the existing scenario, and then 57 in the future scenario. In terms of facilities, you don't have any deficiencies except Springwood fire pump. It's not sized for your new bylaw, which is 250 liter per second. It's only sized for 150 liter per second, but it's not too critical because that pump could operate at a larger flow rate and still maintain the 22 psi, which is the minimum pressure requirement under a fire. This figure shows you the areas where you have, shown in red, the big red circles, where you don't have, where your fire flow availability. So the capacity at that location, the flow rate available is lower than how much is required according to the land use, the development, the building type in that area. So there's 54, actually 57 in the future areas where there's not enough flow capacity. So those will have to be addressed. And usually it's like small dead-end pipes. The design guidelines have been increasing every year over time. Maybe when the pipe was built, the fire flow requirement was lower, and that's why it was undersized according to today's standard. Then we ask Urban System to help us to do the priorities of projects, not just to look at those capacity-based projects, but also look at condition, and then rank again by timing, short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So here we have about 22 kilometers of recommended upgrades, pipe upgrades overall. Out of the 22 kilometers, we have 3 kilometers to address those fire flow deficiencies. Those are the critical ones, because if there's a fire tomorrow and it's occurring on your maximum day demand, which is your hottest day, then you may not have enough water to stop that fire. So that did the scheduling, the ranking, the financial analysis, and then they looked at the total cost. You can see in this figure the short, medium, and long-term plan. And then you can see here the project. This shows the project. Those are the projects to address the fire flow deficiencies. So we are recommending about 3 kilometers of pipe upgrades. We are recommending a couple of new loops. Adding loops is always great to a water distribution system. It improves fire flow. It improves actually also water quality and redundancy. So great to add. When you have the ability to loop a water main, just do it. It's a win-win for not just hydraulic benefit, but also water quality benefit. They also recommended Urban System that you need to increase your funding because there's going to be some expenses in the next 5-10 years. So they recommend to increase your funding to $2 million per year by year 5 and to about $4 million per year by year 10. So the city needs to save more money for all those 22 kilometers that we have, pipes that we need to upgrade to address capacity problems and also condition. Pipe will have to be replaced based on age. They also recommend to check your pump station, similar recommendation to your sewer collection system. Make sure that every 5 years you check your facilities. Finally, we finished the project by doing an impact analysis of Bill 44. So again, what happened if we had 6,000 people more in addition to your existing system? What happened? Actually, here there's a new storage deficiency. It's a small one, but you'll need more storage, about 0.7 megaliter, about 700,000 liter. Springwood booster station, also the deficiency becomes larger. I need a bigger pump there. And about 500 meter of additional pipe upgrades. So with Bill 44, the impact is more upgrades, but not a lot. Only 0.5 kilometer of additional pipe upgrades, a bigger pump for Springwood booster station, and you'll need a bigger reservoir, about 700,000 liter more, because of the 6,000 people being added. I hope I did not exceed my time, Mr. Mayor, but that's my presentation. Thank you so much.
Looking good, Werner, and thank you very much for your presentations. And I appreciate your enthusiastic engagement. It's clear that you enjoy your job, and thank you for discussing it with us today. Just one quick question I had regarding the 54 hydrant deficiencies, Werner. My question is, are those hydrant deficiencies based on pipe flow to the hydrants, or is it due to corrosion built up? The hydrants are too old and they're corroded, and they don't have the capacity to get out of that valve.
Right. No, it's based on pipe capacity. So the hydrants, nothing wrong with the hydrants. It's just the pipe bring the water to the hydrants. Somehow it's too small.
Right. Okay.
And you're right. It could be that the pipe condition, or there's been some tuberculation or some issues with corrosion that affected the hydraulic capacity of the pipe to bring water from the source to that hydrant. That's possible. And when we calibrated your model to predict those 54 locations, because we did not test 54 locations in the field, we only tested 6 in the field. And then that's how we calibrated the model to make those predictions. Where are the areas of other locations where there are fire flow deficiencies? But it's, to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, it's the pipe capacity, not the hydrant, the bottleneck.
Right. Thank you for that. I know dead end streets where the hydrant is at the end of that is particularly hard to corrosive on the hydrant
Yes.
to reduce capacity of that hydrant. But it sounds like we have more hydrants that are just don't have the pipe capacity to reach it. Yeah, and I appreciate your comment about looping them, because I recognize the fact that looping has many advantages. And I know our team has been pretty good at that. When they see the opportunity to loop, they will put in that extra few lengths of pipe anyways to make sure we can turn that into a totally circular system. Thank you. Any comments from council or questions? Councillor Martin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much, Werner, for this. What you've done is give us peace of mind, myself and the future. Very extensive research that's been done. It's much appreciated, and like was expressed by the mayor, your enthusiasm helps. We appreciate this very much. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any further questions, council? Seeing none, I'll go ahead, Councillor Grants, last minute itis there.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, you're louder now. You were a little quiet on the last one, Councillor Grants. If you lean in a little bit, that'd be great.
Great, thank you. Thank you again, Werner. I wonder if you could maybe speak a little bit to capacity for fire hydrants relative to watering restrictions being put in place, and how that's modeled and what you do about that.
Right. So in the summer, has the city put watering restriction?
Yes, we went from stage 3, then we went briefly to stage 4 at the end of the season here. But stage 4 restrictions were for a different reason. We were protecting habitat, water from the Arrowsmith Dam. So those are the restrictions. But we were at stage 3 for most of the summer in the rest of the city.
So when we assess the hydrant capacity and your fire flow capacity, we have to follow the city bylaws. And the city bylaw says you have to assume a fire is occurring under maximum day demand. And that is your hottest day in the summer. And we had to assume this, it's the hottest day in the summer, and at the same time there's a fire occurring. And we checked each hydrant, assuming there's a fire, only one at a time. We considered one fire at one time, where we checked the capacity at each location. We did not take into account any water restriction or water reduction. We did the full 100% maximum day demand. And then we also looked at the future. Also, when there's growth occurring in 2041, by 2041, there's an extra 6,000 people being added. Again, we looked at that. To answer this question another way, your fire flow requirements, Mr. Grants, do you know how much the fire flow requirements? It's about between 60 liter per second to 250 liter per second. So it's a huge demand compared to your maximum day demand, which is even a third of that number. So your fire flow component is so big that even if you add more people or less people, or you add watering restriction, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be still the same number of deficiency, the same location, because that fire flow demand is so big compared to the city demand. So when you think about it, you have to have this big pipe, but for your domestic use, only a tenth is used, and the 90% is only used for that fire that will occur on your maximum data amount, and you have to make that pipe. That's the Barlow from the city, and that's the North American standard for sizing pipes. It's this extra capacity just for fire. So with or without watering restriction, doesn't really matter for fire flow analysis or for fire flow capacity.
Good with
Thank
that,
you.
Councillor? Yeah. Councillor Beal, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you again to our delegation, Werner. It's very, very interesting. I think this is a question more through to Mr. Bowen and our engineering area. With this information, and I'm thinking particularly about the recommendation to loop systems where we can, are we taking this information into consideration with areas that are getting development or redevelopment as an opportunity to, you know, as sidewalks go in or whatever other infrastructure is being improved? Is this now being planned for?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Beal, through Mayor O'Brien. As new development occurs, we will look at the opportunity to have looping where it's required. And in areas where there may not be new development, if it's warranted, we may just want to look at undertaking those types of projects independently as the water provider.
Good enough. Thank you, Mr. Bolden.
No problem.
Any further questions, council? Seeing none, I guess we'll be bidding farewell. Werner, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Your reports were very timely, and you stayed within our timed sessions here. So thank you for that. Thank you for your professionalism. And I think, yeah, that's very well done, sir. Thank you.
All the best. Thank you so much. Bye. Bye.
Okay, we'll wait to clear off. Okay, we're back. I'm back to full screen here, everybody. Okay, so council, we have one piece of correspondence on the agenda this afternoon here. We have the correspondence from Island Crisis Care Society, request for a temporary shower program at Orca Place. So I'm going to move this recommendation, and I'll read it out in full, and then I'll ask for a seconder if I may. The recommendation one, that the correspondence from the Island Crisis Care Society dated October 17th, 2024, requesting temporary use of the showers at Orchid Place between November 25th, 2024 and January 3rd, 2025 be received. And that item two would be that council approve the temporary use of the shower facilities in the public area of Orchid Place from November 25th, 2024 to January 3rd, 2025 to provide continuation of this service to people experiencing homelessness while the SOS shelter program is closed for the holiday season. So council, I hope that's self-explanatory. I've moved that. Do I have a seconder for that? I see Councillor Martin. Okay, open for debate. Anybody, any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering through you if I can ask staff that we get this request annually. Is it required that they come to us every year? We know this program has been successful. It has been well managed, well staffed. There have been no complaints from the neighbors or the community at large. We see the benefit of this program. Why do we make the applicant come to us every year? Can we have some sort of agreement in place? We can review it every year, but I don't think we as council personally don't believe we need to get involved every year into this program. That's my question.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gore. And I asked the same question, and I'll direct the comment to CAO Kaler. I believe it's online. CAO Kaler, can you comment on the request here?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, you're good. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So this is at council's discretion. The Island Crisis Care folks have only asked for it to be approved for this term, but that is up to council. If, in previous years, council has discussed keeping it as a temporary thing. But if council wished to change direction there, council could approve something for a longer term. They do require approval from council because we are the landowner and the lease is written that way that they have to have approval for the space use from council.
Thank you for that, CEO Kaler. And the reason that I feel that it's important that it comes to council each term is because of the fact that since we are the leaseholder, that it's although we recommend, as Councillor Gora suggested, that we have had no situations or problems in the past, but unfortunately, time moves on, managers move on, and different people become operators of this facility type of thing. And so I think it's prudent to leave it as an annual basis, only for the fact that although we're totally in understanding of the need for it, but we're also totally impressed with the management of Island Crisis Care Society under the current management that we have in place. Obviously, nothing lasts forever, so I think it's just prudent that we continue instead of just giving a blanket recommendation. I believe that, you know, it's not that much extra effort for the staff, and as we continue to keep the lines of communication open with Island Crisis Care Society, I think that they're assured pretty well that we're satisfied at the current situation. So yeah, go ahead, Councillor Beal. I see you, I don't hear you. Still muted, Councillor Beal. Still muted.
Sorry, my apologies.
There you are. You're good now. There you
I
are.
got into low power mode, got the cord, everything. But anyway, I'm back on, back in action. I'd just like to say I support your comments entirely, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate that we are supportive of this and it's been well managed, etc. But as you say, it's not doesn't seem to be a lot of extra work. I particularly appreciate that that ICCS does not need to come personally as a delegation and use their time in that sense, that they could submit this request with a letter. It also gives an opportunity for us to get a little update from them and see that they have met with the community, you know, advisory council and anything like that. So I don't think it's too much to ask, and I think it serves to reassure everyone that we are in fact in touch with them and hearing from them.
Yeah, yes, and thank you for that, Councillor Beal. And it's also very timely because we just had the recent update from the Orca Place management team and their report anyways that they do, that we received a copy of the situation quarterly here, and it's just before we have this. So I think we know what's going on, and yeah, we're still obviously impressed with the performance of Orca Place. Move on to Councillor Fraz.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear, Councillor Fraz, looking good.
Thank you. Just wanted to respond to Councillor Gore's comment. I think it's a great question that you ask, deserving some reasoning for it. And a couple of things that I would say is mainly this program that they're asking to offer is what happens through the SOS. So they have a place where it's homed for most of the part of the year. My understanding is with the Christmas time that space is overtaken with other events. And so why they're looking to have it for this temporary portion here. An important part I think is about it being temporary is that Orca Place is primarily supposed to be supportive housing and for the residents. It's not a place for transients or people who don't live there to have programming go through there. This definitely is an exception that was happened in the past. And it's reasonable to be, to go on because it's its success, but because it's also temporary. It also allows for the Community Advisory Committee, who I would suggest is the most important aspect of getting approval for this to happen. Not even so much council. I think as council, we should be supporting what the Community Advisory Committee is supporting as well. And giving them a chance to speak to it because they're really the community and the people behind it, made up of the managers and the neighbors and so on. So, that's why I've always said in the past, when these kind of requests come forward, they should also come with either a letter of support or opposition to it from the Community Advisory Committee. In this case, it speaks to the fact that they went to them and they didn't have any issues, and so they're willing to have it go on again. So that's what I'd be supporting it for. But I do think it's important that they come to us to have that ask rather than just giving a blanket approval on a continuation basis. So if that helps answer it for you there. Also, I think part of the success, just reiterating too, of Orca Place is the fact that, it was a big upset for the community when there was going to be shelter space and transients happening in with people trying to get back on their feet in their homes. And so taking that aspect out of it was a really important part. That's why the soup kitchen aspect of it and the overnight shelter is not allowed there. And I'd even go on to say that maybe this was probably overlooked as far as, perhaps being a shelter's use that just wasn't considered. But it's not supposed to be meant to be a space for transients to be passing through. So again, just why I think it's important that this is a temporary model. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fraz. Moving to Councillor Grants.
Thank you. So this came up as it does this year, it came up last year. I'd love to see us add to the motion the same thing we added last year, which is a request for a written report. It's just helpful for me to see how things went when we give this, when this motion passes, that the service provider submit a written report with details about utilization, learnings, and recommendations for the program. And we attached a date of January 31st, 2024 last year. I'd love to see us add that again this year.
Fair comment. I'm certainly open to amending that motion to suggest exactly that. I would ask for Councillor Martin, are you okay with amending the motion that you seconded? Thank you. Okay, so that amended motion is now on the table to be discussed. And so Councillor Grants, do you want to comment further on the amended motion, or are you satisfied with your description? It was quite complete, I must add.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing that to our attention. That was in place last year. We could have just automatically done that, but I neglected to. My error. I'll take that. Councillor Beale, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to make a follow-up comment to Councillor Fraz's comment, and just to clarify for anyone who's not aware, when Orca Place was first brought forward a number of years ago now, there was never a request for a soup kitchen. That was never, ever, ever in the plan. So I just wanted to clarify that because that might be misunderstood.
Councillor Gower. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the fellow councillors, including Councillor Frass, to giving us the background, and Councillor Grants for the amendment, and Councillor Beale again for the further clarification. I understand as a community how we struggled with how Orca Place came into being and the whole functioning of it. The reasoning I was asking is why this needs to come to council every year. And I understand that most of our council members feel more comfortable that we review it every year, and I'm okay with that. I definitely do support what Councillor Frass mentioned about the Citizen Advisory Committee. I think now we all look at Orca Place being a success among all the other things that we've done for the underprivileged community. It has a lot to do with the neighborhood and the citizens who have been part of this advisory committee. So yeah, I'm okay reviewing it every year, and yeah, thank you again for all the background and the feedback on this.
Thank you for that, and Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think having this on the record every year is a really good thing from a public point of view too, for them to realize that we do review this and it is there and it's successful. It brings the success back to the community too, so that's on the record. So I support all the other councillors, Fraz and Beale and friends and yourself and Councillor Gorse. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I just saw in the chat, it appeared So for the members of those listening online, well, everybody is because we're not in person today. That the amended motion is that the service provider submit a written report to council by January 31st, 2025, with details about utilization, learnings, and recommendations for the program, as well as alternatives to consider in future years. Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Grants. So that has been moved and seconded. I see no further hands up. All those in favor of the amended motion is read. Okay, I got everybody in place. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Let me just get rid of that chat message there anyways. Do we have to go back now to the original motion, I guess, or is the amended motion override?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, that we can approve that as amended.
Okay, thank you. Then it's approved as amended. Thank you, Council. Okay, so we're now moving on with reports. The first report is from the Director of Community Planning and Building follow-up report. This is the official community planning zoning bylaw amendment at 1225 Franklin Gull Road regarding further consideration of application for an official community plan amendment and zoning and development bylaw amendment. Do I have a mover or second for the recommendation as noted? Moved by Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Wood. Any discussion? Councillor Gore, yes, I see you down there. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So would you like any discussion on this here or in the bylaw section?
You can, your choice. We can discuss it either in the bylaw section, which is coming through. Oh, you mean number 5? Is that what you're discussing now? We can take them all separately if you want, Councillor Gore, or are you discussing further on when I believe, if I'm jumping ahead on my agenda here, just want to make sure. Are you suggesting in the bylaw section you'd like to discuss at that time, Councillor Gore? Fair enough. Yeah, that's good. You can save it till then. We'll get it moving on, and then it'll be coming up in bylaw. Thank you. Comment by Councillor Beale. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I certainly want to support this, and I know that based on a number of a lot of correspondence that we've been receiving regarding this particular project, that people will look forward to actually seeing a date for a public hearing.
Yes, that's exactly. These are the steps we take first to provide an announcement to go to public hearing and doing our due diligence. Is there any further questions? Oh, okay. I see Councillor Grants. Unless it's an old hand up, is that current? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and perhaps through you to the planning department. I wonder if, so I note that there has, through the open house, been a fair bit of concern around this proposal. I wonder if maybe the planning department can speak a little bit to the neighboring properties and what permitted uses could be on, in particular, 1209. So the immediately next door property, maybe a little bit of background on what the permitted uses are under the current OCP and zoning for that property, and perhaps, across the street.
Yeah, Mr. Russell, are you online, sir?
I am online. I'm here in the large room down at operations this afternoon.
Thank you. Yeah, we can hear you. We can't see you, but hey, 50% is good.
So with respect to 1209 Island Highway East, that's the Heritage Mall property, and it's currently zoned for highway commercial use, which allows for a small shopping center, and it has a similar OCP designation at this time. A little bit further up the highway at 1180, we have a property that's zoned for multifamily residential, as well as for small kind of shopping center type uses, including small neighborhood grocery type store. So that's sort of within the vicinity today. I don't know what a future OCP may or may not be acceptable to the public, but I would say that it wouldn't surprise me in the future if someplace like the Heritage Mall was looking to maybe add a residential component. That's sort of the trend that we're seeing in commercial properties in the city. But again, that's a process, and crystal ball broken. I honestly don't know what the future may bring there precisely.
Thank you. Good with that, Councillor Grunts?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gore, do you want to present your questions now? It looks like we open up this little proposal, so why don't you can jump in now if you wish.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I was like, we were already discussing this, and I was seeing the comments for the.
I won't leave you out.
But no, I will join the party. I just wanted to recognize. I know the council members are aware that we have received numerous correspondence, especially from members of the Craig Bay community. I want to acknowledge their concerns. I want to acknowledge their opposition to this. And I'll just say this on record. Some of the members have criticized amending the OCP. They have criticized that we should not be building housing that far out away from the amenities. And most of us on council have discussed this with our planning department. We don't think this is the best location. Personally, yes, it's far out, but to make affordable housing project that cost a third of your income, first of all, those are so hard to get by. Get to, like these days, there's so few of those that are available. And speaking to one of our staff members this morning, it was quite intriguing that our kids who are graduating from schools, from universities, they are the ones who will be occupying such housing, because market housing is becoming more and more unaffordable for people, even rental. Forget about buying anything. So this is the least we can do as a community, as a city, to first of all offer city land that has servicing available. We have looked at other options, and those are not feasible financially, and they're far out, even further. So I personally think not giving an opportunity to people to live and work. We know this is going to be workforce housing in Parksville. I could not do that. Yeah, and some of the members who are opposing this are also kind of living far away from amenities. So I, as a council member, I think it's incumbent upon us to help build such housing. I support this project. Lions, we know, have been working really hard for years to make this happen. They have looked at different other options of properties, but this is what has been offered to them. This is what has come to us as council. So I'm supportive of this. I do recognize, and I want to appreciate people who came out with petitions and opposition. This is part of democracy, and your voices were heard, and we want to make sure that we hear your opposition to this. Overall, I think, sir, amending the OCP when it's a direct benefit to our community, I can justify that personally as a council member. And a lot of letters and emails in support have also been received by the council members. And I know, Mr. Mayor, you were in touch with one of the members who is so thankful to be living in such a housing that Lions has built. And these are like working people in our community. These are working in healthcare who will be going into such housing. They are working in our coffee shops, service industry. So these are providing the essential services that a lot of the Craig Bay residents will be benefiting from as well, and the larger community. So I support this, and I hope the rest of the council also sees the benefit of this housing and are supportive of this project. And I'm looking forward to other comments from other council members on this. Thank you.
Yes, and I want to make sure that this is recognize the fact that we all have our own opinions on this housing project. But in all actuality, council, this is a public hearing process and we go to public hearing. So quite frankly, all of us are to have an open mind right at this particular part of the discussion. So it's good to say that you perhaps support it in what we've already heard, but in reality, we haven't heard everybody. So, and the other thing I would caution as well to actually identify Craig Bay as being opposed to this. We, for the record, we have also received a lot of correspondence and phone calls from those individuals of Craig Bay development in support of this as well. So it's not just an opposition. The people in opposition clearly do not speak for the entire Residents Association. So having said that, I would think that it would be prudent to just look at what we're moving and seconding today, which is to go on for further public engagement. And then I believe after we've heard that, with the open minds that we have, then we will make the decision, and then we can make all the clarification of what you have heard from the public, and then we can make a decision at that time. Unless there's anything else discussion regarding what we're moving and seconding today, I would like to keep our comments to that. Go ahead, Councillor Martin, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is it appropriate for me to share? I mean, I was going to thank our planning department, because I went up to see, and this is where I think that the public needs to know this. I know it's a motion we're going to do right now, but the cost and the whole point of the land available, and this came to us in November 21. Not our council, it was the previous council that started doing this project with the Alliance Society. But my point is that the other lands that we have available, because this is for affordable housing for people who are working, is really not other lands that we could possibly use, considering there is only one other that I understand as a possibility, which is where the water tower is. And just the infrastructure alone would be $2 million. And I went and learned about this in August through our planning department. Whereas this one, like Councillor Gower mentioned, is very affordable. It's about $180,000. It could be more a little bit, but not like $2 million. So that the infrastructure alone is what makes it affordable. So I'm just wanted to make that point.
Yes,
and for now, yes.
And that's fair enough. That's just consideration of the site itself, and it's good to identify the fact that the reason that the site is chosen, selected by previous council, it was because Parksville owns it, and it would be suitable for a housing complex. But obviously, we have to go through the proper procedure for the zoning and OCP, which is what we're doing right here now. So that's what we're doing, folks. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So that's great. If there's any other discussion about the motions that are on the floor, I was going to take all five unless there is any other discussion about that. I don't think I've got this moved and seconded yet, do I? Moved by Councillor Franz, seconded by Councillor Wood. Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Beal.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. I have down here that it was moved by, oh, hang on, who was it? That it was moved perhaps, moved by me and seconded by Councillor Wood, but perhaps
Okay.
I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I see that here, and that's why we went into full discussion. That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Well, yeah, I thought, well, how did we get to that deep conversation? But
Yeah,
that's the way we go sometimes. So I appreciate that. So
Okay,
what I'll say is if there's any further questions at this point.
And I just do want to say, I want to thank you for your comments, because I think it's important to just kind of get back on track. And that what we're looking at here is whether we approve the going forward so that we can get to a public hearing. And thank you.
Exactly. Any further questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Councillor Wood, There you go. Okay, yeah, you're in and out. Okay, that's great. So that passes unanimous. Thank you, council. That was all 5. So we're moving on to number 4 on our agenda. The next report on the agenda is Director of Community Planning and Building regarding the consideration of a development permit at 365 Molliet Street South. Okay, do I have a mover or second for the recommendation for both recommendations at this time? Moved by Councillor Grenz, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any discussion? Councillor Grenz, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I just think it's worth celebrating one more time this project coming to Parksville. The proponent selected Parksville on Vancouver Island, which is, I think, something we can be proud of in the city of Parksville. And this will provide a great service for people in our community and around Vancouver Island. So I'm excited to see this come to fruition.
So thank you for those comments, Councillor Grenz. I too am pretty excited that they've chosen our community because it's going to be of direct benefit to those in our community. And so I'm very pleased with the not only the proposal, but their building layout and so forth. I think it's going to be a very very considerate and compassionate care unit, and as we know, in a great neighborhood in Parksville. So I think they're going to complement each other. So yeah, thank you for that. Any further comments? All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you, council. The next report on the agenda is from the Director of Finance, the Asset Management Strategy, a verbal presentation regarding long-term financial plan and capital investment. I believe we have Ms. Holmes coming forward. I can't see, but I'm assuming. Ms. Holmes, are you online?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Why we wanted to bring this to you today, Amanda's just going to share the PowerPoint here, is to really follow up on the presentation you received at the beginning of the council meeting and how that ties in with our asset management planning work that we've done and our overall asset management program. I also want to point out to you that part of providing really long-term strategies like we saw with the master plan, and as what I'll share with you today with respect to our long-term financial plan with respect to capital investment, is really to identify significant issues that are on the horizon, to give council an opportunity to turn to that now and to start to put some strategies in place to resolve.
Sorry.
The numbers are meant to be.
Sorry, Ms. Holmes, we just lost you for a second. We lost the screen. I don't know if you quit screen sharing, but your audio is in on my end anyways. I don't know about anybody else. Give me some nods, people. Was that kind of disjointed at your end too, or was it just at my end?
Just lost connection, so.
Okay. Yeah, I would suggest that you back up a paragraph and repeat, please.
Sure. Can you hear me again? I'll just do another sound check.
Yes, you're good now. Thank you.
Okay, and Amanda's just going to work on sharing the screen. Let's just make sure we've got that before we get started again.
Okay.
Okay, can council see that PowerPoint?
I'm good at my end. How about council? Everybody thumbs up would be helpful. Yeah, I can't see. Okay. Yes, looking good, Jetta, and we can hear you.
Okay, great. Let's just start from the top again to make sure that everybody heard. What we want to do today is provide council some context around the management plans that were, the master plans that were presented at the beginning of the meeting, and how that ties in with our asset management program for the city, as well as we start to develop our long-term financial plans, which will tie in with the reserves policy that's coming later in the meeting. And part of the purpose of these really long-term plans is to identify issues that are on the horizon, to give council an opportunity to address those with some strategies around things like funding, or perhaps even changes in service levels in an attempt to respond to some of these things that are identified. One of the things that you'll notice today is the numbers are big, and they're meant to be attention getting, and that's part of it is we're using rough estimates, and part of it is we want to know what we need to work towards. And so council's made some great attempts at getting started with reserves over the last few years, and we are putting some money aside. But I think what was identified to you earlier in the master plan presentations is that we've got a ways to go on that. And part of what we're going to be bringing to council over the next, say, year to 18 months is the asset management plans related to various asset categories. And included within that is monies that we would recommend to council that we start putting aside towards the eventual replacement or renewal of those assets. So we'll just walk through some of that today then. And the first slide shows what was in our asset management strategy. And so this is, the strategy is what we've been working away on. It was adopted by council about 18 months ago. And one of the things is to start to integrate the asset management plans, including things like master plans, into our long-term financial plans to try and identify where we have gaps between what our projected costs are and what we're putting aside or what projected revenues are. So just as a reminder, currently we're putting about $450,000 into the water fund as an annual funding envelope, and for the sewer fund, $375,000. And so what our financial planning process will do is give council an opportunity to hear back from residents about their ability and willingness to pay for that long-term picture and have an opportunity to make changes as needed. We will expect within about 6 months for council to also be receiving the storm master plan as well as our transportation master plan. And so we'll be filling in the pieces with respect to other significant infrastructure as we go. Once we have those, that will give us the majority of our really critical infrastructure information that we need for doing the asset management plans. But one of the things we'll talk about today is the need to synthesize those plans together. As you may recall, for example, when we did the Moss Road project, we did all of the 4 components of linear infrastructure together. As you can imagine, it would be much more expensive to do the water pipes 1 year and do the sewer 3 years later and do the roads another time. And so what we need to do is synthesize those 4 linear infrastructure master plans to make sure that we're getting the best value for our infrastructure dollars and to make it also the least impact to residents and impact to our financial plans as well. What I think we saw today from our presentation is that the range at which we need to increase this funding envelope is probably 7 to 10 times this annually. And so we'll be bringing you more information on that in the financial plan as how we can work towards that. As our consultant commented, that's probably a 5 to 10 year goal, and we can talk about some of the assumptions based within that. One of the things that we do with our asset management planning is essentially peeling the onion. And what we've been working on the last couple of years is condition assessments and replacement cost, and haven't yet begun to formally document and cost the levels of service. So the first iteration of this information we're bringing to you is mostly about replacement cost. And so what we'll see here is that of all of our assets right now, again, very rough estimates, we have about $1.1 billion of estimated replacement value for Parksville capital assets. Of that, the water is about 275 million, and our sanitary sewer assets about 175 million. So within the master plans that were presented today is approximately 40% of Parksville's replacement value and our total asset value that we're looking at in terms of our asset management plans. What I will say is that these estimates are really rough, and as projects get closer, we're able to fine tune those estimates. But right now, we could consider these might be out as much as 50%. So They might be 50% higher, they might be 50% lower. Again, what we're trying to do is identify kind of order of magnitude items that we need to look at. And as we know, the comparison between what we're currently funding and what would be suggested is pretty significant. I'll also note that the water assets include just high level estimates related to the water treatment plant. As you know, we're working on our drinking water study, and a lot of that will inform what assets are required in ERWS and city water. And so more work will be required on this. One of the reasons that our numbers will actually be lower than what's in the master plans is related to that synthesization of the projects. And so their numbers are going to be higher than ours because they'll look at water as a standalone project or sewer as a standalone project, where our numbers look at those projects as being done together. We'll have a lower contingency than they have. We use 20% and they use 30% on some of our costing. And the other adjustments related to unit rates are based on our specific project knowledge. So we know what's coming in our projects currently. And the consultants likely are using more generalized, perhaps Vancouver Island, but more generalized either way. We also have our own city design standards that we can also fine tune our estimates based on those. Another way that we can check our estimates and how kind of valid or rough they are is perhaps to compare to another community. And here we show a comparison of some kind of multiples related to the city of Nanaimo. A community that's nearby that has a similar climate, has similar topography, just to kind of ballpark, are we in the right area? And so what you can see here is that it does actually show that our multiples as compared to Nanaimo actually kind of prove out, at least within a reasonable amount that we're happy with. And we did this process really to check in on that and to make sure that the estimates that we're providing are at least somewhat consistent with what other municipalities are doing. And what you can see there is that for sanitary sewer for Parksville, our annual estimated investment requirement is 2.3 million. And right now we're using about 375,000 as our funding envelope. So right now, if we won the municipal lottery, we might increase that by 6 times to be in line with what our estimates are. Again, those are just estimates and provide kind of a guiding number. And as part of the financial process, we'll bring some alternatives to council as to how we maybe move towards that over the next 5 to 10 years. A similar slide for our water assets, again, shows that our multiples are within a reasonable amount in terms of comparability, and show that our annual estimated investment requirement for Parksville Water would be about 4.1 million. Right now, we are using about 450,000 as our funding envelope. However, council has approved some extra contributions to the water capital reserve, just as a matter of kind of within the 5-year plan to keep enough funding in there. And so there's $100,000 to $200,000 extra on top of that 450,000 that has been in the financial plan already. And so kind of smoothing that out and combining those two maybe is already at a point where we can start to increase that number quite significantly. But compared to what we're seeing here, we've got about 7.5 times what we are currently contributing to get to what is suggested based on our estimated replacement value. And again, these numbers aren't meant to alarm you, but they are meant to kind of provide an order of magnitude as to where we're at in our contributions towards future funding and infrastructure deficit, and to give council the opportunity to look forward in terms of providing funding and strategies for closing that gap. As you've seen before, and likely what you've heard of, is the infrastructure deficit and the kind of things that come from that are in the headlines every year. And we've seen in the past where this last year it was Calgary that had a catastrophic break in their water main, which we don't often see in major centers, but I guess they'll sort out what it was that caused it and whether that was deferred maintenance or whether it was due to be replaced next year. I don't actually know that. What we're trying to do for council is to provide an asset management program that has us avoid the catastrophic breaks that are very expensive and very impactful to residents, but also to avoid catastrophic funding requirements like Vesuvius saw last year, where they started with a 39% tax increase, whittled that down to 24, and I expect that the residents were still shocked by a 24% property tax increase. In Prince Rupert, they also had very, very significant infrastructure deficit, but because of their kind of position in Canada as a significant port, the federal government and provincial governments stepped up in very, very significant ways to provide the funding to improve their infrastructure. Although we've had lots of higher level grant funding from other levels of government, I don't expect we'll see funding the likes of which Prince Rupert received. And so what we're trying to do here is to peel the onion and provide council with suggestions and recommendations to avoid these types of scenarios, both on the funding and on the infrastructure damage fronts. At the same time, we also have costs increasing just in our basic operating costs. And so part of the financial fund balancing will be weighing these needs for the future against what we have currently coming in our wastewater treatment from the regional district, as well as our own water fund meter replacements and the water treatment plant upgrades that may be required in the next number of years. So we'll be bringing all that information to council for you to consider. Stepping back a little bit in terms of the funding of asset management. What I really like to look at it is it has two significant components. One is the maintenance part and one is the kind of future replacement or renewal. With respect to the ongoing maintenance, which would typically be funded by our property taxes and user rates in the context of water and sewer, is that we want to extend the life of the assets and thereby defer the renewal cost. What we hope to do with this is, one, the longer we can defer that renewal cost, the better, because it gives us more time to put aside monies for that. But as well as we just want to get as much life as possible out of our assets. We also want to minimize those catastrophic failures and the resulting costs by doing that regular maintenance. And that's really important. You'll see a lot of that when we bring the financial plan to you next week. The other part is the annual funding envelope, or the piece of funding that is required to replace and renew those assets as they are used up. And that part is really comprised of two parts as well. It's the part that we're doing in the current year. You'll see capital projects in the financial plan, but it's also what are we putting aside for future replacement and renewal. And that's this piece of trying to estimate what our future replacement cost is and start to build reserve funds or other funding strategies for that. What that also allows us to do is to avoid the significant peaks and valleys like they saw in Vesuvius, where all of a sudden you've got a huge capital project and it's got to be funded out of property taxes. So you get the 24% increase instead of the regular property tax increase, and then you fund it out of your reserves. The annual investment in maintenance and funding envelope, as I see it, is really a proxy for the use of the infrastructure, and all ratepayers should be contributing to that. So regardless of when the assets were put in the ground in the first place, and regardless of when they'll be replaced, every year we should see the people that are using those assets contribute towards the ultimate replacement of them as well as the maintenance. What I will remind you is that any upsizing of the infrastructure that was referred to in the master plan will and should be funded by DCCs, and so we'll capture that within the upgrade to the DCC bylaw. Here's just a pie chart that essentially shows how this might look So we've got kind of our three components of our asset management funding. And as I see that, that's our proxy for the use of those assets in a year. And what we would want to get to is that we don't have those peaks and valleys. So perhaps the total investment in a year, just for rough numbers, and these aren't meant to represent anything at all, but say it's $25. Well, in one year, that might be a $5 capital project, but in a subsequent year, it's a $15. And the mix of those amounts would change to keep that property tax amount relatively similar year to year. And so what we know though is that all of the residents are contributing towards the asset management related to those assets and the services that are provided with those assets. The $1 million question, though, no pun intended, is that what amount of the future renewal should be funded? And what is the optimal funding envelope given the significant unknowns and the estimates involved? So some of the factors that can be considered are, do we assume a certain level of grant funding? The city has enjoyed quite a great level of grants over the years, and so how that impacts what we get in the future and what programs are available is completely unknown. And we do our best to apply for as many grants as possible. There's the whole question of generational equity and who should pay for it, which is related to my concept of that annual proxy in saying that everybody every year should pay something towards the use of those assets. And so perhaps this is or isn't a question, but it is something that often comes up when you're discussing the future funding of capital. There is, of course, a financial sustainability and making sure that the city can, in the short term, provide affordable services to its residents, but also making sure that in the long term, the city can continue to provide those services by having assets that are ready to provide those services, either through renewal or replacement or ongoing maintenance. Another piece that we discussed somewhat with respect to the reserves policy is just the flexibility that having these reserves on hand gives to council and its ability to fund various projects. For example, you may want to move up a project a year or two because there's perhaps somewhat recessionary position in the economy and you can get some favorable pricing. If you're able to do that because you have the reserves on hand, it gives council a lot more choice in its financial planning, and you might get better pricing than was even estimated. This is a chart that I showed you last year during the financial planning process, and it really is just a short illustration of the kind of cash flows related to saving over time for the purchase of something versus borrowing the money perhaps through MFA long-term debt and then paying that down over time. And as you can see, it typically, and this of course depends on interest rates and borrowing rates, but in this illustration, which is probably conservative, you can see that saving the money with the benefit of compound interest actually has less cash flow associated with it than borrowing and repaying those funds. And so this is what I would say provides some support to at least put a good chunk of money aside in reserves, is because we can earn that compound interest and residents don't actually have to put out of pocket for that money. So with respect to alternatives for kind of phasing in and implementation of increasing that funding envelope related to capital, we've got some alternatives that we'll bring to council as part of the financial plan. The first is the obvious add a percentage rate increase for asset renewal to the current rates in water or sewer. So this would be similar to the 0.5% that we're doing in the general fund. This is what the city of Nanaimo does. They add a 2% per year related to their water and sewer. The challenge with this one is that residents' consumption can change the amount then that actually gets contributed towards asset renewal because it's dependent on how much water they use. And so it's not as easy to calculate as it is with property taxes, which is a firmer number. So that brings us to the next one, which is to say, we could add a fixed charge to each utility bill as essentially an asset management fee, which would be similar to what we currently do for the water treatment plant replacement fee, in which all residents or all folios get a $10 charge per utility bill, so $20 a year. That amounts to about $140,000 a year. So we could do something similar towards general asset management. An alternative to this would be to put a parcel tax, an asset management parcel tax on the property tax notice for water and sewer. And the main benefit to doing it this way would be that then that parcel tax could be deferred, where the tax or the fee on the utility bill would not be able to be deferred. We have about 9% of our property tax folios in the city actually defer their taxes. So this would be of significant benefit to a significant portion of our residents. And the last would be to look at the whole rate structure for utility billing and perhaps increase the minimum fixed amount that we currently have in our water and sewer. There's a minimum amount. And then change that variable consumption charge. And with all of these, one of the best practices is to use a fixed fee related to your long-term replacement and renewal of assets, and to use your variable fee to fund your variable expenses, like your operating and maintenance expenses. And so one of those types of scenarios is probably what I would recommend to council, but we can look at how we could phase those in and what the impact would be to utility fees, and have a combination of these alternatives if it was appropriate. For your information, at the end of 2023, the water capital reserve was only about 1.1 million and the sewer capital about 1.3 million. So that's not a lot of money with respect to how much these projects cost in 2024. And so I think it is something that's important and that we need to get a start on, even if we're starting small, that we're moving towards the funding of those larger replacement volumes. For your information, just in terms of other municipalities, Nanaimo puts about 2% aside for their utilities. Ladysmith actually puts 10% of their prior year property taxes towards asset management in current year projects, and then another 5% into reserves. So they have about 15% of their property tax levy is going towards this asset management funding. And so it is something that municipalities have been working their way up, and I think Parksville could do that as well in a sustainable way. One more reminder, a slide that's carried forward from last year is just to show the benefit of when we have an increasing reserve contribution versus a steady amount per year. It really does compound very quickly with lesser impact to our residents. And so looking at some combinations of funding alternatives, I think will be helpful to council, and getting started a little bit more than we did the previous year goes a long way in the long run. So just in terms of next steps, as you know, next week we have 2 committee of the whole meetings. And so right now those will just reflect our core financial plans and reserve contributions that were approved by council last year. At the November 4th and 6th meetings is when we'll be bringing forward items for council's consideration and decision, and that's where we'll provide some alternatives and some recommendations related to these additional reserve contributions for council's consideration. I'm happy to take any questions on this if you like.
Thanks, Jenna. I have a couple of concerns. So, you brought up the fact that, you know, that's going to be discussed, you know, at the end of the month and in November with the committee of the whole meetings. I'm surprised that this wasn't just saved until then, you know, like, because you're talking big numbers on asset management and the reserves and so forth. And where we're all on the same basis, and like, okay, we're all looking at the tax increase. I'm just wondering why this was brought up now. instead of waiting for the financial plan, which is when I anticipated we'll be talking about all the asset management.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just so that I understand your question, you're wondering why we're doing this today versus during the financial plan?
Yeah, why we're doing this now, instead of waiting for their financial plan meetings that we're all just looking forward to with anticipation, as you know. But I'm just wondering why this is at, like in a regular council meeting, why at this point, I'm not sure.
Well, I think what we wanted to do was provide it with the presentation of the master plans, because our consultant is providing you with some big numbers that are even bigger than the numbers that we estimate it to be. And I wanted to provide to council some context around that and what our asset management team has been working on in terms of replacement values. So their numbers are even bigger than the ones that we're saying. So we wanted to provide some context with respect to what our staff has been looking at and analyzing based on our actual capital assets. The other piece is also to provide some context around the reserves policy that was also on today's agenda. And those two really tie quite closely together in terms of the long-term financial planning. And so really it was to give you a heads up for what's coming today, just to really give you some thought around that. And then knowing that in next couple weeks of meetings, we'll be bringing you some more details, but to just really give you some thought around that, because we know that what was presented in the master plans are significant numbers and didn't want that to be alarming without some context around that.
Oh, it's alarming, all right. Mission accomplished. So just a couple of comments. I appreciate all the information, and I understand, and I knew that we were going to have this conversation. And but in context that we just heard about the water and sewer master plans, we have the TMP and a few others, as well as the fire department, and so they're all coming at us. All the I can say, yes, this is a good heads up to what we can expect, but at the RDN level, I can say, and you be familiar with this, obviously. The latest buzz at the board table, the elected officials are wanting to know, like, any time that we approve anything, like a recommendation for, it doesn't matter what, in anything financial, a recommendation to do this or put reserves aside and so forth, they're saying, what does that equal for my population, whatever it is in the RDN, like a what percentage of increase, because that is going to be very valid. Because what had happened in the past, quite frankly, at the RDN is that everyone was passing all sorts of recommendations for financial, whether it's increase in services or infrastructure. They were passing it because it was the right thing to do, but nobody was actually really, totaling it. Nobody had that calculator that was running the tape to say what all these amazing packages that are being approved equal to tax increase. So we're, as elected officials, I think it's important that we understand exactly what each one of these reserve contributions are going to be, and whether we put it into utility bill or whether we put it into the property taxation. I think we're going to be at the table. We're going to ask you very hard questions. We're going to say, well, that's a good idea, and we appreciate the recommendation. What does that equal for our public? Because I can tell you right now is that the property taxation model, with hearing the reports that we've had now, and hearing reports on the fire department, hearing reports on every plan that we've done, as well as that we tried to get a recreation project as in the swimming pool. Quite simply, it is not sustainable under property taxation being our only funding model. And so as municipalities, that we are working hard with UBCM and FCM, that we're Sean can even elaborate even further on this, Councillor Wood, I should say, because of the municipal infrastructure framework that we're pushing hard, because it is simply not sustainable by a taxation model only. We can't come close to this. The costs are escalating at such a rate that it is way exceeding. Doesn't matter how much building we put in, is way exceeding the capacity of our residents and business to pay for. So there has to be another one, and asset management clearly is a great program that identifies infrastructure that needs to be replaced. It may be in danger of failing, but it just needs to be replaced, period. but it simply cannot be done by municipal taxation. We're at the point now where I have residents now just saying, enough is enough. You can't do this, or and then I say, but all that we can do then, we have to replace this infrastructure. You need the water and sewer. All that we can do is reduce services severely. And so that would mean like going through all the services we provide between the city of Parksville and the RDN, because that's what we're talking here. We're talking our residents and businesses here pay both. We pay city of Parksville taxes and RDN. So we have to take that all in context. It's like really what, how big is that wallet, and how many people are we going to put on the street? So, and that is further to the comment that you made, and I appreciate the fact that you were saying about the payment being coming from property taxation instead of taking the payments, the increases for reserves and put on the utility bills. Well, you nailed it when you said that there's a lot of people that actually survive on the fact that they're property tax deferments, but they don't get that on the utilities. And so the thing is that utilities, if we build the instruction or the infrastructure reserves in the utilities, they can't write it up. They have to come up with the cash for that instead of realizing on their deferred value of the property. So I don't think that's a way to do. I think that's going to cause many people to be upset in our area, predominantly seniors, of course, because that's what the deferment program works with. So I don't think that's fair, really, because we have that deferment program for a reason, is because they're usually on limited pension income. So to suggest that we're just going to jack up your utility bills to pay for future improvements, I think that's an end run, but I don't think it's being honest or fair. So I would hesitate to that strategy. All that I'm suggesting is that all that we're hearing is everything is costing more and more and more. And we're going to have to look at the other levels of government, and between the provincial, we're going to have to look for additional funding sources. It's as simple as that. And whether we're taking a cut of whatever, whether it's the liquor and tobacco or whatever it is, they're going to have to start giving municipalities a cut of other income sources. And we're going to have to fight hard, because we can't do this on our own. We can't do this on the backs of property taxation. So there's my 2 bits worth. Well, actually not 2 bits anywhere. So it's probably like $1.50 by now with all this inflation. But yeah, that's my feelings on it. Just going into these financial meetings, it's going to be tough going, and recognize that we are elected officials. And if the public feels that we've hammered them too hard because we're doing the right thing, I can guarantee you we won't be back in 2 years, to fulfill this needs. You'll be voted out if you actually go beyond the people's means. So that's the way it goes. So it's a hard line. I appreciate where you're telling us, you're giving a warning and a heads up, but the warning and heads up is not a pretty picture at all. So we need to change some policy here to make sure that we can do it, because we're talking people. These are people's lives, and we got to make sure that. I just crashed my laptop, but that's okay. Even my laptop is telling me to end it now and let somebody else talk. Okay, sorry, Jetta. Yeah, any comments on that, Jetta? So sorry.
Well, thank you for your comments, and certainly your thought process is very similar to mine, which is why we would like to bring council a number of different alternatives. But one thing that I will say is that if you recall last year, we had that cumulative schedule that showed the cumulative impact of various changes. And so council will have the ability to understand where we're starting from and what each incremental change might look like in terms of an increase in utility fees or property taxes. And we can change on the fly as we go through the financial planning process. So we will make sure to make sure that council knows what the cumulative effect of various changes are, so that you can have the full knowledge on that.
Yeah, that's great. We need that tool. We really do. And I appreciate that because that's what we're going to have to answer to our public, because we're representing them. So thank you for that. Councillor Gore, you had your hand up, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I echo your comments. I agree with you. I think we have discussed this previously at this table. how the current property tax model and all the expenses that municipalities have to deal with is not working. And I think our role, our strategic priority as advocates for our residents, I think we need to do that like we did with the short-term rentals, yourself taking the lead on that. I think we as council members need to push it further. I have a question for Jetta. Can you talk about a little bit about the unrestricted surplus and how perhaps that could be factored into some of these costs, and or is that something we are not touching to some of these expenses? Can we use some of that towards these possibly in the future?
Yeah, thank you for your question through the mayor to Councillor Gore. Possibly, it's really, for lack of a better word, a drop in the bucket in terms of what we need to put aside. And so I think we can take pieces of the unrestricted reserve more towards operating reserves than capital, because the numbers for the capital are so big that we would restrict our flexibility and ability to meet current liabilities as well as unexpected expenditures by reducing that unrestricted reserve too much. And so you may recall last year we pulled some out of it for the policing reserve, and there may be other reserves like that once you get into your next agenda item with respect to the reserves policy. But I would be reluctant to pull too much out with respect to capital that hasn't been specifically identified as capital surplus, just because it really restricts council's ability to have flexibility around its finances if we reduce that too far.
If I may follow up, Mayor.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
so what I was asking, Jetta, thank you. And I was hoping maybe you can help me understand the finances a little bit better. If we were to take, let's say, a percentage every year from the unrestricted surplus towards some of these operating costs, I know that may affect the overall growth of the unrestricted surplus, but that also softens up how much we need to draw from property taxes. Is that something we could do, you think? Like on an ongoing basis, we draw a percentage from the unrestricted surplus rather than just a one-time seed money kind of thing for project.
Through the mayor to Councillor Gore. It's not really a good practice, because what it ends up doing is you're not funding your current operations with current revenues. And if you recall, we've looked at that chart in the past where it says, what are our ongoing revenues relative to our ongoing expenses? So it might be appropriate at times to pull from the unrestricted reserve for one-time expenditures, or perhaps one minor capital project or something like that, or a smaller capital project. And the reserves policy that is next on the agenda speaks to looking at each year's surplus and giving council the opportunity to allocate it towards various reserves. So at times, if for whatever reason a surplus in any one year was larger than expected, and who knows what the reasons are, and they don't matter really, there would be an opportunity for council to say, let's put an extra X $100,000 in the capital reserve, or in the cold weather reserve, or a climate change reserve, or something like that. I think it's better if you address it in the following year once the surplus is known, versus using current unrestricted surplus to fund current operations. I think that's a slippery slope that leads to 3 years from now having a really significant property tax increase because you were using this non-recurring funding, and you get to a point where financially it just doesn't make sense to restrict yourself anymore, and you have to go back to property taxes. So what my recommendation would be, and what the reserves policy speaks to, is to look at it in the subsequent year, and then you know what you've got in terms of being able to allocate that.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Martin, you have your hand up. Keep in mind, Council, that I'm watching my time and I'm watching our agenda. So I'm going to limit the questions here coming up pretty soon, because I know we have an in-camera as well. And I'm not, my intent is not to go overtime. So just so you know, so thanks, Councilor Martin, go ahead.
Yes, I'm just asking, Jenna, thank you very much for this explanation. Is it possible when we come to having like these investments and things and costs, is it possible to say, you know, Parksville's a beautiful place and we have a lot of benefits here, that maybe like, could we say cut back on some of the things that we have already? This is what I would do if it was my own household, if it works for the city. And we don't have for a year or two some of the things that we maybe can cut back a little bit on, so that it isn't such a big blow for the tax increase. It's just an idea. I would, you know, I don't expect you to answer me right now, but when we come to actually understanding what we're going to have to vote on, maybe we could have these kinds of options put forward to us, not just, well, this is it. So, and I know, Jetta, you do that. And this is just an idea I have. So thank you very much. I don't want to get into belaboring this. Thank you.
Thanks,
Through the mayor to Councillor Martin. Absolutely, at any time it's council's discretion to change service levels by reducing or increasing what services are providing. And one of the kind of strategies with respect to long-term asset management is identifying assets that can be decommissioned or that won't be replaced, for example. So I think that that's a good question, and it's something that can be asked during our financial planning process as we're looking at this.
Great. Thank you, Jetta. Councillor Beal, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick comments. First of all, thank you very much, Jetta, for this. When I added up the figures that Werner gave us earlier, it added up to, in the short term, you know, between 1 to 5 years, needing to set aside 4.4 million. So I was gratified to hear that you say that, in fact, it would be less, because you would be looking for efficiencies, and also that you're saying that you don't want to be alarming us, but these are significant figures. I really appreciate the heads up, and that also that you will be able to present what it might look like with different scenarios or combinations thereof. So I look forward to learning more about this in the future. Thanks for your time.
Any more questions? I don't see here. We just had, that was a verbal presentation. Thank you, Jetta, for that. I'm going to move on, seeing no further questions here. The next report on the agenda is once again from our Director of Finance regarding the reserves and surplus policy. Go ahead, Ms. Holmes.
Yeah, I wasn't going to discuss this too much, other than to explain to council this is something that we introduced a year ago with respect to setting up these reserves, establishing this policy, which is certainly a best practice for municipalities to have a policy like this, because it provides council with an opportunity to make really deliberate choices about where the surplus is living, and whether that's specifically for long-term projects or just to manage the year-to-year financial piece. And so the report is in the agenda and the policy for your review and approval on that. Thank you.
Councillor Beal, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just not sure. I normally note down who moved and seconded, because I understood that we were to be receiving it and approve a policy and so on and so forth. And did we in fact do that, and have we voted on that?
We haven't. We were just talking about, I wasn't sure whether Ms. Holmes was going to do a presentation beforehand. And then we would look at the recommendations as such. But no, I haven't asked for a mover or seconder yet, because I thought that there might have been a presentation first. But apparently not. It's all in your agenda package. Regarding the reserves and surplus package, do I have a mover or seconder for the recommendations for all five? Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Gore. Discussion now. Yeah, go ahead. Any discussion further on this? Everybody satisfied with it? We had previous discussions on that. You like what's in the agenda package? No questions? All those in favor? Thank you. That carries. Bylaws. We have under the bylaws, we have first and second reading and advance to public hearing. The Plan Parksville Amendment Bylaw 2024 number 1492.8. Regarding the map amendment to multi-unit residential and development permit area extent adjustment at 1225 Franklin Gull Road. A mover and seconder to go to advance first and second reading and advance public hearing. Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. That carries unanimous. Thank you. Bylaws for first and second reading. We're going to Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2024, number 200151, regarding the amendment to CD 36 at 1225 Franklin Gull Road. Do we have a mover and seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Gower, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. We have, moving along, we have number 6, a notice of motion. Are there any notices of motion to be presented this time for next council? Seeing none, thank you. We will go to liaison reports. We move to liaison reports. Councillor Martin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The PDBA recently had their AGM. I think most of the councillors were there. And what they presented to us was Imagine Parksville Downtown, which is a project that they have taken on with their grant that they were given. And it's an extensive project. And it will be several years before we actually see it to fruition. But more information will be following as it goes along. It's not going to be waiting for the final result. I think we'll hear more along the way. The Parksville Downtown and District Historical Society, this Saturday they have trick or treats at the museum from 5 to 8 p.m. Last year this event was well received with 500 attending. I'd mentioned it before, but I just thought I would say this again because it's a Saturday. And all the young and old can come. It's not just for all the young. So everyone, and there will be costumes there and everyone to enjoy. Also, the manager is Rachel, and she's working with the reduced hours until the end of the year. And if people want to know our openings, the website will have all the different times because they're reduced, but they are staying open until the end of the year. So that's good news, really. That's a change from other years. So that's my 2 reports for this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Beal, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that in the interest of time, I'd like to just put the table, defer these till the next meeting because there's nothing that has to be covered at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, is nothing time sensitive then, Councillor Beal?
No.
Okay, thank you for that. I would appreciate that. So seeing that, do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation that pursuant to section 91 E, F, I, and K of the Community Charter, Council proceed to a closed meeting to consider items relating to the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements, law enforcement, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, and negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service. Moved by Councillor Grens, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? Thank you. We'll carry on into in camera at this particular time. Council will give 5 minutes. I am showing 3:30. Let's reconvene at 3:40.